Hello, my name is Alexandra Riley, and thank you all for joining me today. Today, I will start by telling the story of George Stanley. George Stanley was the youngest person to be put on death row in the 20th century. He was only 14 when, on June 16, 1944, he was sentenced to the death penalty. Even though his jury was full of 12 white men and he had no evidence put against him. He was even interrogated in a room alone with no adult present, where they claimed he confessed. The trial lasted only 2 hours and 30 minutes, and the decision for his death penalty was made in just 10 minutes. This took place in South Carolina, where racial tensions were at an all-time high, and Black people had no voice in the community. It wasn't until 70 years later that he was found not guilty of his charges. The justice system failed him and has failed a lot of people now. My thesis statement is African Americans are disproportionately treated unfairly in the justice system. Today, I'll discuss how America's history of racism and oppression in the justice system has started. I'll discuss the treatment of African Americans in the justice system, and I'll also discuss the effects of African Americans in the justice system. People often do not realize the roots of criminal injustice in America. The original American policing began with slave patrols. Slave patrols were set in place to control the enslaved people, to make sure nothing got out of hand, to protect whites' economic success. They did so with psychological harm to these people as well as physical harm. This lasted up to 150 years. After the Civil War, the Southern police departments often continued the same aspects of slave patrols, which included things like systematic surveillance and curfew enforcement, as well as controlling who could be a police officer. This was then followed with Black Codes. Black Codes were laws set in place that didn't allow Black people to vote. They couldn't testify, and they couldn't be part of the jury. Part of Black Codes included vagrancy laws, which meant that if you were a Black person not working for a white person, you could be sent to jail. These vagrancy laws included being arrested for just walking at night. Does that sound familiar? America's history of racism and oppression continues to manifest in the criminal justice system. This leads me to the war on drugs. Local police departments were having a hard time as they were under pressure, showing that they were making progress. And to show that they were making progress, they think that higher arrest rates would be the solution. So drugs that were placed in the Black community and pretty much any disadvantaged community heightened the arrest rates. After this, the Black people took up 43.3% of the jail population, while they only took up 13% of the population While white males took up 75% of the white population, they took up 35.7% of the imprisoned population. Over-policing, arrest rates, and higher sentences became a huge problem in the Black community. Even the forced use of Black people became a big issue, especially this year. This year, after George Floyd was killed by the police, after a police officer went and lifted his knee off of his neck, the Black Lives Matter movement went into full effect as there were protests all around the U.S. It sent our country in turmoil as there was protesting, looting, and things got violent. People got hurt. Some people were even kidnapped. The effects of the unfair justice system can also ruin lives. It's common for parental incarceration in the Black home. This leaves the Black woman to fend for herself as she has to raise a child or even children, while a Black male can be in and out of prison. These women are oftentimes not given much help. This leaves them with economic and emotional challenges as they fear that they cannot take care of their families. They fear what other people may think of them, and they feel guilty for having their children grow up in a home without their fathers. Incarceration also affects the ability to fully transition into society after incarceration, especially the workforce. The workforce is already hard enough for African Americans as there's barriers set in place. So there is the chances of recidivism, where people are often seen to go back and be reoffenders. This is because people feel as if they have no other choice, because they just need to go back to what they already know, because life out there is hard for most Black men. Racial discrimination and oppression has started long ago and has still followed us as we are living through a time of change and progress. We will overcome. So to summarize everything, racial discrimination and oppression began a long time ago and has affected our justice system. This begins with slave patrols, and slave patrols became American policing. Even the badge has not changed much. This has led for now, the justice system is unfair as incarceration rates are high, even pulled over at a higher percent, and Black people just mainly being a target of racial injustice. And this causes for problems within the Black homes and Black men personally, as they can't transition to society, and Black mothers are left alone, and it's ruining lives. To conclude this, I'll give a quote by Martin Luther King that says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So if you have friends that are experiencing this injustice, you should support them, because you never know what can happen to you. Thank you all for coming.